Hello, I'm Mayor Rick Goldring, and welcome to Burlington Matters. Burlington Matters is a program that I host here on your TV that features discussion about events and issues that are occurring in the city of Burlington that are important to you. And today we're talking about the Carpenter Hospice, which is one of the great assets that we have in the city of Burlington, and a major new project that is underway with regard to starting the planning for. And joining me today is Karen Candy, the Executive Director of the Burlington Carpenter Hospice. We have Brent Patz, who's a board member, and Lynn Varga, the Resident Care Coordinator. So I say welcome to all three of you, and thank you very much for joining me today. The Carpenter Hospice is one of the great brands in our city. We're so fortunate to have such a dedicated group of caring people in our community. And Karen, can you give us a little bit of history about the Carpenter Hospice? How did it all come to be?
Sure. So for those that don't know, back in 1999, actually, a group of citizens here in Burlington, a couple had been exposed to hospices in other communities and just thought, why doesn't Burlington have a hospice? And so they rallied together and rallied some folks in the community and started the planning and fundraising for the hospice. So the fundraising and planning began in 1999, and in 2002 we opened our doors. So that was almost 16 years ago, and since then we have had the privilege of caring for more than 2,300 Burlington residents and their families at end of life, as well as our programs have grown so that we now can also help and support those that are living with a life-limiting illness or going through life's transitions as well, and their families as well.
And Brent, you're a proud Rotarian, as am I.
Yes.
And Rotary Clubs of Burlington played a significant role in the foundation of the hospital, or the hospice, I should say.
They did. Rotary took a leadership role back in 2002, a little bit earlier than that, in getting involved and having support both financially, but also, as you know, being a Rotarian yourself, when they get behind a project, it's with the full force of a big community. And as such, Rotary's always been involved in a board capacity and supported it, not just in the initial build, but over the years, the hikes, the galas, the various third-party events and what have you can do. You're always going to find a Rotarian involved in some capacity as well. On the board, like I'm a Rotary liaison to the board, but I think there's another 2 or 3 members of the board who are also Rotarians, so we get involved.
So Lynn, you are the, tell us what's your title again, I'm sorry?
Yes, I'm a registered nurse,
right.
And I'm the Resident Care Coordinator.
Resident Care Coordinator.
Hospice, which is essentially the leader of the nursing team, the clinical team at Hospice.
So what is it that a person requires most when they're nearing the end of life?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's so important for people to be able to have their family around them, their family, their friends, people who are important to them, and they want to be safe, they want to be comfortable, free of pain, free of any symptoms that cause them any distress at all. And that's really what we're able to do at Hospice when individuals and their families come in to us at Hospice. That burden of caregiving can be lifted because families and friends are able to connect with their person who is nearing the end of life and enjoy that time free of the burdens that are caregiving and the worries that come along with caregiving. Our clinical team are very exceptional nurses, RNs, RPNs, and personal support workers are able to take on that role and really help families and friends and people to be together as they need to be.
Now, you have served individuals who are dying and their families, and those individuals are of all ages. Mm-hmm. From their 90s, their 80s, their 70s to much younger.
Yes.
Is there a difference when you're tending to the needs of a 30-year-old versus a 60-year-old versus a 90-year-old?
It's a very good question. Needs are so individual. often regardless of age. Sometimes younger people are prepared. Sometimes older people are more prepared. When we have, children who are there with their loved one, so maybe their mom, their grandmother is in their 90s, and their needs are strong as well. So even when you have someone for 90 years, you want them forever. So it's not really different in many ways. It's so individual, and that's, I think, as well what our team really appreciates and is able to focus on, is listening to individuals and listening to their families and really working with them on their goals of care, and how they want to spend that time. Sometimes we have big parties at hospice. Families will come in and need to spend that time together, and other times it's small gatherings, and that's for the very young and the very old.
Talking about the end of life is very difficult for many people. Karen, I've heard you speak many times. You talk about we're a death-defying society. Everybody's born to die. The death rate is 1 death per person per lifetime. I mean, you can't dodge that.
Yeah.
But boy, it really creates a lot of angst with a lot of people. And I know people who have been struggling with, been in palliative care, but been healthy enough to deal with some of their personal affairs that have to be dealt with. And it's better to deal with them ahead of time as opposed to having your family deal with them. But still, there's a hesitancy to wrestle with some of these personal issues that you have to deal with. What's your advice? And lawyers have a challenge getting people to update their wills. Insurance agents and estate planners and financial planners have a hard time getting people to really think clearly and coherently about what the needs are of those people left behind. How do you encourage folks to have those discussions?
It's tough, I say to people, absolutely, it is a tough discussion to have. No one likes to think about their own mortality, but the fact is, the old adage of only death and taxes, well, I hate to say it, but there are countries in this world that don't pay any taxes. So really, the only certainty for every single one of us is we will all die at some point in time. And there's statistics and research that say people will spend more time planning a 2-week vacation than they do planning or even considering how they would like to see their life near the end of it. But the biggest thing is we need to talk about it. It's a difficult conversation to have, but like retirement planning, you may not need it for years from now. But talk about it now and it's an easier conversation to have when it's not looming or you're not facing that crisis right in front of you. It's much easier to discuss your wishes and what you value. And some people will ask me, well, I don't even know how to begin to have that conversation. And so I said, think about someone who has died. Maybe it's an acquaintance or a family member, and what was that experience like? Was it a good experience or was it a bad experience? And what made it a good experience or what made it a bad experience? And then just begin to think about those good or bad things or qualities of that experience, and how maybe you can change them, or what might make a difference for you, or what would be important. To Lynn's point about, maybe it's very important for you to have your family around you. Maybe not. Maybe it's more important for you to just have 1 or 2 very close people to you. But it's starting to think about what you value, what matters most to you, and how you would like to see that play out, and then starting to have those conversations with people and tell people what you want. We see families who come to the hospice who have been able to have those conversations versus families who haven't. And I have to say that, oftentimes the grief journey, if you will, for those families that have been able to talk about it, it's not as complicated a grief process, and it's not as complex. And so I really just encourage people to just start thinking about what's important to you, and then not be afraid to talk about it, because we have become a death-defying society for lots of reasons. But we need to shift that pendulum back a little bit so that we're not so afraid to talk about it.
It's interesting. My wife and I are going through the process of updating our wills. And I said to her, we got to go to the funeral home. We got to pre-plan our funerals. And we don't necessarily have to prepay them, but we'd like to pre-plan them and get that out of the way. But even I'm going to, but we have to do it. And it'll make it much easier when we do pass on, that our families will be able to take direction from what our direction was, as opposed to trying to make it up. I remember when my dad died in 1984. I'm on the phone from the family cemetery in Toronto, and I had to say to my mom, do you want to be cremated as well? Because they got to know whether it's going to be single depth or double depth. And I hear, a day after my dad had died or 2 days after, and I'm asking my mom these questions that would have been much easier to be dealt with ahead of time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we hear from families as well, and individuals, that if they can get past that fear and actually have those conversations, there is a sense of relief that comes with that, and everyone feels more confident that they're making the right decisions for the individual, or the individual's making the right decisions for themselves.
So you offer many programs, and the resident care is the obvious one, that you've served 2,300 individuals and their families since the hospice doors opened in 2002. But you have other programs. You have wellness outreach. You have supportive care. Does one of you want to expand on that? Lynn or Karen?
Maybe we can do it together.
Tag team, great.
Tag team it. So yes, we have, as you mentioned, the resident care program, and we have a number of individuals in the Burlington community who are dealing with a life-limiting illness that utilize our wellness program at Hospice. So that consists of programming to bring people together to sort of share in that journey, and there's some structured events that they do, from restorative yoga, getting together for socials. There's a knitting club as well that meets at the hospice, which is quite fun. All the staff want to get in there too and learn to knit.
And these are people that have life-limiting conditions.
They do. That's right.
But they get together for socials and activities and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Is there discussion about what they're going through?
Yes.
I mean, I guess there must be great support.
Yes.
But being in there when you've got people in the same circumstances or similar circumstances.
That's right. Formalized and informal. So formalized within sort of the structure of the programs, but they make connections with one another and become a support to one another as well, which is really wonderful. And then we have our supportive care program as well. So essentially that's all about helping individuals to deal with grief and bereavement, to be able to manage and to be able to work through that, because it's not it's not something that's stagnant. It's when you lose someone in your life who's important to you, it's not that you have a set period of time where you grieve and then that's done. It's a process. Your life is ever changed. So we have programs through the hospice. We have a supportive care coordinator who sets programming, and we use our volunteers a lot as well. We have volunteers that participate both in our wellness programming and in the supportive care programming. And from individual sessions, meeting with our supportive care coordinator, who is fabulous, and as well we have group sessions. People come together to again support one another and experience some structured programming together. We have a walking group for bereavement, which I think is just fabulous, because
the physical activity would be very positive.
Absolutely.
To your mood.
So they come together and they walk together and go for coffee afterwards, and if you feel like going for coffee, great. If you don't, that's okay. But it just forming those networks, and that facing end of life and dying should not be something that people need to experience alone. We are a community.
So on that note, we're just going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back on Burlington Matters with guests from the Carpenter Hospice in Burlington. Welcome back to Burlington Matters. I am Mayor Rick Goldring, and with me today are our three guests from the Carpenter Hospice here in the city of Burlington, talking about the great things that the hospice has been involved in since 2002 and the great service they provide in our community, as well as the plans to expand the services. Brent, you have your own unique story about why you're connected to the hospice and why you're so passionate about what this hospice is all about. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely, and pick up on a couple of things that Karen and Lynn had discussed a little bit earlier. My experience is personal. My wife, she spent her last 12 days at the hospice just a little over 5 years ago. And like so many other people, we didn't want it. It wasn't a conversation we had, even when she was diagnosed with cancer. It wasn't a conversation we had in the house. It's a sense that by having that conversation, you might be giving up, right? And this is what I was thinking about when Karen was talking about earlier, how we don't want to talk to the issue about death and our own mortality. And what I learned through my experience at the hospice, it wasn't really actually giving up. It was giving a little bit of hope or a hopefulness and to the situation, because having gone through the experience, the hospital experience that we went through as things progressively got worse and worse, and you come to a realization that that's really not the best place for a person to be, but not just the person who's facing their final days, but the family as well. I often say the hospice, there's sadness at the hospice, but it's not a sad place, and there is a real sense of family, compassion, care, but community as well. I talked a little bit about it earlier with Rotarians, like we're community. And I felt that in the kitchen, which is a hub, and whether this family member is 70 and I'm 45 and this one's 30, but there's a commonality to all of this, right? And we support each other and care for each other as well. So that was kind of my experience, but it was tough to come to terms with it, and I did personally feel a little bit like I was giving up, and to the point where you almost you're sitting in the room quietly with your spouse and you're apologizing, but then after you spend a little bit more time, you're apologizing because you feel you're giving up on the person. But as the more time you spend in there, you really realize you did the best thing you possibly could for your loved one, but also for your family who are going through that experience as well. So I couldn't be a bigger supporter or more passionate about what Carpenter Hospice does for the community, and I'm so thankful that it's there, right?
So is it quite natural, Lynn, at the beginning there's some trepidation from people, as Brent has expressed? Mm-hmm. Is that common?
It is very common. When someone comes, there's often a lot of obviously a lot of tears, a lot of concern about how is this going to be, and worry that are we giving up. And there's a bit of a settling in period for sure, and I can't tell you how many times I have heard after that settling in period. Sometimes it's a few hours, sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's a couple of days. But how often I've heard, if I had have known that it would be like this, I wouldn't have been as afraid to come, and I would have come sooner. And recently I had the daughter of a woman who came to us the next day. She stopped me in the kitchen. Her mom had come in the day before, and she stopped me in the kitchen the next morning and said, I have to tell you, I feel like there have been 1,000 pounds lifted from my shoulders having my mom here. So while it is a difficult transition to make, it really is, it brings hope to family to be able to process and to prepare and to live through this time together.
I think it's redefining hope,
right,
is what it is. Instead of giving up, it's redefining it, and
right,
really with a palliative approach, because we recognize it's not only the individual, but it's also the family.
Yep.
And that really, it's more about living right to the end versus dying. It really is about living the best possible life you can with the time that you have remaining.
So recognizing that Burlington is a growing city, our population is aging. The percentage of people over age 80, 85 is only going to significantly increase over the next 10, 20, 30 years. The Carpenter Hospice is responding to that. Karen, can you tell us
Sure.
about how you're doing that?
Yeah, so in the last number of years, our board has been planning and doing a lot of work as far as visioning and looking to the future and what it may hold for Burlington specifically. And we know the population is aging. That's certainly been a factor for quite a while as our population globally ages. But we've also come to recognize that people are telling us that their place of death, where they prefer to die, is actually at home. So there's a growing number of people who are wanting to stay at home for as long as possible. So recognizing that we need to support those individuals as well, the boards of past and present have been planning and looking to the future to figure out how can we do this. So how can we take that great care and support that residents and families receive within our four walls and push that out into the community and be able to support more people in their home for longer period of time.
Do you foresee a time where you'll be able to say, we have, obviously you have a capacity to serve 10 families and 10 individuals at any given time in the hospice itself?
Correct.
Do you see setting some sort of program that you'll have an ability to serve another, say, 10 in their homes at some point?
Absolutely, and I would guess at this point, not knowing exactly the future even more than that. I think, we work really closely with our community healthcare providers in the city to look at what gaps there are, where are pieces that maybe we can fill in and we can help, so that as a community we're helping folks that are living with a life-limiting illness. So absolutely, I think there's lots of opportunity for us in the future. Our challenge is that when they built the hospice, in 2002 when we opened, no one imagined the demand and the increase for need of service that we would be facing today. And so we've quite frankly run out of room. We don't have the extra space at the hospice
so
to be able to grow.
So you have a plan to make room. You have a plan to make room.
We do have a plan. We are making room. Yes, so we are just embarking on our Making Room project, and we are excited. We are building an addition, so we will have 10 brand new state-of-the-art resident rooms. We will move our existing residents into that new space and then repurpose what is the existing hospice. We're going to renovate it so that we have the capacity and the space to begin to grow our outreach programs and offer more programs and services out in the community to folks living at home.
And I assume you offer outreach programs now,
we
but
do.
The number of people you can serve through this redevelopment project will be significantly more.
Correct. We're sort of busting at the seams with the numbers that we're serving right now, but the demand and the growth of that need, it continues. So being able to renovate and just make a little bit more room for us, we'll be able to support that growth and expansion.
And it's a $6 million project.
Correct.
And you have $3 million in the bank.
We do.
So you're looking for $3 million from the,
Correct.
From the community.
We are very fortunate at Carpenter Hospice that for the past 15 years we have been supported by this community. It's absolutely amazing, nothing short of mind-blowing. And because the boards have recognized this need and recognized that we were going to have to grow, we have been saving our pennies. So we have $3 million in the bank that we are putting towards this, and then we're asking our community to help us raise the other 3 so that we can continue to do the great work that we do.
And if anybody wants to get involved in the project financially or otherwise, Carpenter Hospice website is a great place to get more information and get contact information.
Absolutely.
From all of you.
Yes.
To get involved. The hospice really is a great organization, and it is a community-run, not-for-profit, non-government board of directors.
Yes.
that oversees the governance of the hospice. Big budget, though. Mm-hmm. How much is the budget of the hospice?
So our annual operating budget is $2.5 million every year. We do receive a small amount of funding from the Ministry of Health, but that only covers about 48% of our operating costs. All of the rest is through our fundraised dollars. And one of the things I think that people don't realize when they first come to Carpenter Hospice, but is amazing, is that it's absolutely free. There is no cost to the end user. Because of the support that we receive from the community, we are able to offer all of our services and all of our programs and existing outreach services for free. It's free of charge. It does not matter your financial ability to pay or not. The community is here to support you through Carpenter Hospice.
But the brand of the hospice is so strong. I talk to many people whose loved ones have died at the hospice, and people absolutely rave about the experience that is provided there. I mean, it's something that for everybody involved to be very proud of. But I assume that does help, provide an impetus of more people donating to the hospice when they have that personal connection. And I would hope it becomes somewhat easier each and every year to generate the money that you need for your budget.
I think so. I mean, we hear from families all the time that they want to pay it forward.
Right.
I mean, sort of to Lynn's point earlier, I think people, there is that initial fear of what coming to hospice will be like, but once they get there and have experienced the care that they receive as well as their loved one, so many families say to us they want to pay it forward. And I think that's where we start to develop that base group, is just our families that have been with us. I receive cards and letters from families all the time, and I just recently received an email from a young woman who's getting married.
I have to interrupt because you receive a lot of cards. I know you receive a lot of.
I do.
It must be very gratifying to see all the letters that come in for all of you.
Incredibly gratifying.
That's very special. But I do have to wrap up the show, and I do want to say thank you to Karen Candy, the Executive Director of the Carpenter Hospice, and Brent Patz, a board member, and Lynn Varga, the Resident Care Coordinator of the Carpenter Hospice. Thank you all for what you're doing in our community for serving people in need. It is a great organization that we should all be proud of. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to Burlington Matters. If you have an idea for a future show, please email me at mayor@burlington.ca or call at 905-335-7607. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Burlington Matters.